Hi, I'm your host, Brent Feldman, and we are back with another episode of Mix and Matchbox. Today, I am actually joined by Keivan Mohammadi, and he's the Director of Sales at Insait. Hey, Keivan, how are you doing?
How you doing, Brent? It's nice to see you.
Yeah, definitely good seeing you as well. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Sure.
I'm going to jump right in with a straightforward, easy one. How'd you get to where you are, and what's kind of the quick story of your career path and some of the experiences that shaped how you got there?
Sure. Yeah. So I actually started in this industry while I was still in college at William and Mary, and I had the opportunity to intern for the CRO of Finastra, which at the time had just become Finastra, but big global fintech, works in every region of the world as a solution for everything. And I was with their enterprise team, looking at more regional banks up to tier one banks, selling stuff like syndicated loan software. And that was a really illuminating experience for me, because in normal life, when there's tech advancement, you kind of see it right away. But in the banking world, they almost appeared to be about 10 years behind. So everything they were selling, the incumbents they were selling against, there seemed to be such a big gap that to me, it looked like a lot of opportunity. And that's really what piqued my interest. And from that point, I joined Finastra after college. I started in sales, working with community banks and credit unions. And then from there, I switched over to EnCino for a while, selling their mortgage suite. And now I'm here at Insait selling agentic AI.
Cool. Awesome. Well, that is cool. And by the way, yeah, I now thank Insait. I actually have unfortunately been mispronouncing it. So now I've got it stuck in my brain. I won't forget that. You have spent a lot of time actually helping community banks and credit unions modernize. And I think you just, said it in your last response about how, maybe a lot of help needed there to get everybody up to speed and kind of move things forward. But what's the biggest gap that you've seen between what bank leaders say they want digitally and what they can realistically execute?
Sure. I think partly it's not their fault in the sense that they don't want to be going through a big project every year. And the advancement of technology is so rapid that they might implement something over 2 years. And then, year 3 or 4, something new has come out that is considerably better. And now they're stuck in a hard place because they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars implementing. They've trained everyone on their new software. And all of a sudden there's something better. Whereas something like a fintech, like a SoFi, can do it fairly quickly. They have their own development team, and they can do anything on the fly. So that puts these banks at a disadvantage. And it's really tough to kind of overcome that, especially when you're locked into long-term contracts. The other big gap, I would say, is kind of understanding what they need to do to compete with some of these digital lenders. Like they might say they want to modernize experience, but they're not necessarily, I guess, taking the initiative to do so. A lot of times they're focusing on more of the operational side. How can we be more efficient? How can we get these loans in and out quicker? But it's really tough to actually sit down and take a look at what the digital experience looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of back up and get a wider lens on really what's going on. I think also what you said just about the compassion about, maybe the lifts that they are, like going through if there was ever a core transition or like, big implementation. Yeah, exactly. You have the internal onboarding of everybody on that. You've got obviously external customers that are going to be affected. So definitely there's a lot that they're trying to move usually with one single project. So every single one is a pretty heavy lift.
Sure.
That's cool. All right. Well, what's your hot take on how other firms may be throwing AI solutions at banks and credit unions? And how is this either bad for the industry or bad for their brand? Hot take only.
This is my big frustration. There's too much messaging out there. Like we have an AI solution that does all of this or all of that, and we can solve all of your problems. And I think the focus has gone too much on the technology itself and less so on the use case and the pain that they're solving for. And for the bank side, or credit union side, I really have a lot of empathy because they're getting about 1,000 messages a day saying, our AI solution can, shorten your loan life cycle by half. It can do this, it can do that. And truly, it really doesn't do any of that. It might tackle one small problem, which is good, and that's what they should focus on. But they're exaggerating a bit in what they do. And I think at the end of the day, you really need to focus on results and how you can help in specific areas.
Absolutely. Actually, I think that touches on, the noise and the clutter that is out there in this realm about, like AI in general. And I think it's hard for customers to kind of decipher what is real, what is going to be helpful or materially, beneficial to my business. So, I mean, like, I think that definitely is one of those things where people are throwing out generally the same message of like, yeah, AI is out here to solve all your problems. Like, well, what are the problems?
Fact. Yeah, you have to first define the problem before you can solve it.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, I guess where do you see the most traction for AI solutions right now? Is it, on deposits, lending, onboarding, support, or something else entirely?
Yeah, so I think I'll answer this in two ways. I think at the moment, we're seeing heavy deployment within internal operations and customer facing support. And I think the reason for that is there's a fear of hallucination and of AI kind of messing up customer interactions, maybe providing the wrong information, which will create liability for the banks. So almost everyone we talk to is kind of hesitant to deploy it in a customer facing manner. And I think that's the greatest opportunity. I think that's where they can really bring parity between themselves and some of the digital lenders or fintechs out there. Having that agentic or Gen AI solution on the front end, guiding customers through the process and counseling them. But for the moment, the real opportunity is in support use cases, whether that's call center or just a general Q&A bot on the website helping customers.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. This is a little tangential, but I will definitely say, like, I feel like you're totally right. I think there's absolutely a lot of customer facing opportunity there. And shout out to a platform that we use, like Rippling. Anyway, it's their AI bot interaction through support has been fabulous. And I feel like it is really on how you implement it and what it's doing for you. But they've got extensive knowledge base docs and everything that it's referencing. And then it's giving us actionable information, like great customer service, theoretically, even as the bot without human engagement. But then they tap the human to come in as that process is happening. So anyway, I think you're totally right that, people may have trepidation getting into that customer facing oriented AI because of exactly what you said, like, the potential for hallucination. But at the same time, like, if that reticence prevents somebody from having a better customer experience, that's where, you just want to make sure that you're reinforcing that, oh no, it can be great. It's just how it's implemented.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. As far as like, banks, they move slow, usually for good reasons.
Yes.
There's definitely a lot of compliance and things that they have to keep up with, and then sometimes there's just a lot of people to make decisions there. But what are the real blockers to adopting AI? Is it risk? Is it compliance, procurement? And how do the best teams get over those hurdles?
Yeah. So I think certainly risk, like you mentioned. I'll actually bring up an anecdote I heard about an airline that was using Gen AI and in a customer support capacity, and the agent gave the wrong information and they were served with a $20 million lawsuit. So you certainly don't want to mess up there. And I think that's a fear that the banks have, especially since they have so much sensitive information that they're giving out, and you don't want your agent to hallucinate and do the wrong thing. The other big obstacle, I think, is defining the use case and being very narrow in how you use AI in action. A lot of institutions we meet with have these kind of grandiose ideas where all the information is going to flow through one agent and it's going to do these 400 different things. It can help you with anything. But the most successful firms that we've worked with have defined a very narrow process and integrated AI or an AI agent within that process to help expedite it and make it easier. So to give you an example, there's a bank we work with that wanted to expedite the onboarding of big businesses to their bank and those services. And what they did is they used an AI agent to essentially collect and pre-populate questionnaires from documents that the customer was providing to them. And that usually was a 2 to 3 week process. There was a lot of chasing around for the customer, but they can now do that in about a day or two. So that's like a very easy, narrow use case that they're able to solve for. And I think that's the right way to think about it. Like, don't try to reinvent the wheel. Don't try to reinvent your current process. Find pieces of it, integrate AI, give it a narrow scope of focus, and have it help that way.
I love that. If anybody took anything away from the episode, I feel like that's like the probably the best advice ever. Yeah, people tend to have this idea that they want to jump in and solve every problem their business has ever had with, like, with AI. And I feel like the narrow use case is just such salient, important advice, because when you can get it to do one thing and one thing well, then you can adapt, you can change, you can modify, you can, sort of go from there. But when you're trying to tackle too many things at once, it never works out. So I love that.
I agree completely.
Cool. Well, I guess you said one of the biggest challenges is how hard it is for banks to evaluate and onboard new tech quickly. And what does an ideal evaluation process look like, that's still sort of safe and compliant? And I'm sure it's something hard to, sort of like evaluate and make sure it's the right fit. But like, what does a good process look like?
With regards to AI solutions today, I think the most successful institutions have run kind of like a mini POC with non-sensitive information, no PII, and they've seen it in action there. And then even at deployment, when they are live with some of that data, they're doing it with limited exposure. So a lot of institutions we've worked with personally have, let's say they are putting an AI agent live on their website. They might expose it to only 5% of traffic. They get data, they figure out what works, they figure out what they need to adjust, and then they change that exposure to 10%. So starting slowly, limited sample size, limited use case, and then expanding from there once you feel comfortable, rather than just throwing something out there live and letting it do whatever it has to do. I think that's the real best approach to do this.
That's great. Well, actually, speaking of implementation, can you give more in depth on this? So, like, when an institution says we want this live, what are the first 3 steps that you take from concept to pilot to production without chaos to help get buy-in? I know you mentioned, basically kind of sampling small, sort of little bits that can definitely help, and also get kind of stakeholders bought in. But are there more steps in terms of what that true implementation process looks like?
Yeah, there absolutely are. So one thing that we do is you have to talk to the end users, so to say, like the people who would actually be using this on the front lines and whose job it would make easier. You have to understand their process in depth. And so we spend a large portion of our time meeting with them, defining their current process and understanding how we can best integrate our technology into their existing process to make things work a little bit better. And I think a lot of times there's not a lot of maybe parity between the stakeholders who want tech transformation and the end users who, are doing their job and aren't necessarily aware of the tech transformation that's coming about. And to give you an example, this is a non-AI example. I have a friend who works for a regional bank in Virginia, big bank, big commercial lender, and she was underwriting and spreading in Excel like her entire time there. And then all of a sudden, without telling her, they implemented a new commercial LOS, and it completely disrupted their process. And it is chaos there now. No one is happy. The stakeholders at the top said, we're going to have this new technology come into place. It's going to make us more efficient. But no one told the people who are actually using the technology or doing the work. And now, it's not a nice place to work at the moment, and they're trying to work through that. So I think you really need buy-in from top to bottom, and you really need in-depth information on how the bank process works today.
Oh, wow, I think that's really some good maybe unconsidered or insight, because there are probably better ways than others to reveal technology shifts and implementation sort of things than there are maybe obviously on the other side of it, where, it's not sort of clear to everybody internally. It's not clear to the customers who are actually being confronted with it. And then, what you get is an unfortunate mess. What would you say are better ways to, you mentioned, get all the stakeholders in, but how would you, maybe properly address it to customers that may be facing this technology shift, and making sure that it's not an abrupt, big change in their sort of workflow? How can you get them to adopt it more easily too?
Yeah, again, starting slowly. And in the case of my friend, maybe starting with like a small subsection of their loans, and saying, all right, we're going to go through this very slowly with the vendor's team. We're going to originate these loans and go through this entire process. We're going to teach you. And then slowly, very slowly, we're going to start incorporating more of our business through this new LOS. And all of a sudden, 4 months later, like, you're no longer using your old process. Now you're exclusively on the new one. And I think this resonates no matter what role you're in. Like, if all of a sudden we got a new CRM at my company and I wasn't told and I had to start figuring things out on my own, it's going to be very disruptive. Things are going to be slower, and it's going to be harder for me to do my job. But if slowly, very slowly, I'm going through and being trained on how to use it, then 5 months down the line, it'll be very beneficial.
And I think that's helpful too, is people are confronted with this, like, you must be adopting AI now, you must be implementing, everything, to not let that overtake, that getting into the process shouldn't be something that you rush. Yes, everybody does need to be figuring out how this can be, beneficial to their sort of processes, to their people, their customer base, but basically just don't go too fast.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I know right before we jumped on the podcast, you were saying that you were excited by this next question, which I'm excited to ask you. But what are the most important guardrails for an AI agent in financial services? What must be controlled by business rules versus, model behavior and human review?
Yeah, so I think the scope of information is very important. I've heard anecdotally that there are some banks that are just directly feeding all of their customer data into large language models, and that scares me. I don't think that's a good approach. I think that's terrifying. So what most banks try to do is they have a very narrow scope of information that they provide to the agent. If you have an agent that's originating mortgages, for instance, like, you're going to feed it only information pertinent to mortgages, and then defining the steps that the agent must take. The agentic piece of the AI agent, like, should have actionable steps in a chronological order. So narrow information, actionable steps that it won't deviate from. I think this is the best way to avoid hallucinations and to avoid the agent taking action that it's not supposed to.
Yeah, that is good. I know everything must have guardrails, and I feel like in here it's the most important. I am equally terrified by people feeding LLMs a ton of personal information. That sounds
structured information. And I mean, just imagine if we see it too on a daily basis. We see people try to hack through our agent. They're trying to make it hallucinate. They're trying to get it to provide information it shouldn't provide. And we get those reports directly to our dashboard and we flag them. So this is something that institutions should certainly guardrail against.
Yeah, that's great. I just watched that. What was it? The 60 Minutes thing on Anthropic, to where, yeah, they have people in charge of hopefully helping it try to hallucinate, battle test it, make sure that, that things aren't going awry. And I feel like that's such a critical piece, because people are smart, and we are still, hopefully at this point, smarter than the AI.
For now.
And we have to use that ability to make sure that obviously people aren't using this for nefarious purposes. So yeah, or otherwise. So that's why, yeah, battle testing everything is always important.
Absolutely.
So from a marketing and a UX standpoint, where do banks lose conversions today? Is it forms, drop-offs, abandoned applications? Do you have some of this, like, data, even anecdotes, and how do sort of conversational experiences maybe help that process and can amplify conversion flow? Yeah.
So we definitely have this data, and to give you context on how our company kind of came about, we started as a predictive marketing platform with the goal of taking bank data and basically telling them, listen, we looked through all your customers, and these 2,000 customers are, really ripe for a CD campaign, for instance. We ran campaigns like this for some of our banks in the Midwest, and we had a lot of success. For one, we generated, I think, about 12 million in new CDs in a 2-week period. So a really effective proof of concept. At least we thought, until we reviewed the data and we looked at their digital forms, and we saw that their conversion was really low. It was about 2%. So I think this is the bigger problem, and this is why we pivoted to solve that problem. Like, while they generated 12 million in new CDs, they could have generated much more, but they were beholden to whatever digital process they had. And it's whatever vendor provided them that process. It's really out of the box. standard application form. And I think the big issue is, how do banks try to recreate, or credit unions recreate, that in-branch experience where you get guidance, where you're counseled through the process, and you make sure that you're making the best decision, because these are big decisions that people make with their money. They're probably the biggest they make in their life, outside of maybe buying a home. And you don't want to be, let's say, you want to be sure that you're doing the right thing. So when you go through a loan application and you're not a financial loan officer, you don't know all the terms, there might be some confusion. Like, you want to be counseled in some capacity. But if you're doing that online, the banks and credit unions just don't have the resources to be there for you. So in switching from a static form to something that's more interactive and counseling, like a Gen AI agent, I think is the best way to try to overcome this hurdle. Because even myself in this industry, if I go and apply for a loan through a website, like, there's stuff that confuses me. And all of a sudden I'm switching to Google and I'm looking up terms, and then I get like an ad from Rocket Mortgage and they've got my business. So I think that's the biggest red flag for the banks today.
That's great. And I can say from our side, as we're building all these web presences, is that bad UX will absolutely plague an experience, and can be absolutely detrimental to conversion. So I think that's super important, because just as much as you're able to get people there, welcome people in, you don't want it to be the floor is lava to get to the end goal. Make it easy. Well, cool. All right. Well, I get the last question I got here for you is that if you were advising a 500 million to maybe 5 billion community institution, planning for the next 12 to 18 months, what is one customer journey you'd modernize first with AI, and what KPI would you hold it accountable for?
Yeah. So if I was let's say a community bank or credit union, I think the big place they need to start winning is with younger people. And I have this conversation all the time with bank and credit union leaders, where they tell me the average age of their customer is 55, 65. And I mean, that's fine for now, but it's not going to cut it in the next decade. Like, they need to get younger. And the one thing we know about young people is they're very accustomed to technology. They use it in their everyday lives, whether that's Chat GPT or anything else. So you need to make the process of banking easier. So I think anything to do with auto loans or deposits is a good place to start. You need people opening an account with the bank, and then slowly from there you branch out to other lines of businesses, and hopefully those young people will use all their banking services with your bank or credit union rather than go to a digital lender or anyone else.
Absolutely. Wow. And you're absolutely preaching the same thing I do about, like, getting younger customers in the door. There, in general, I feel like there's a lot of people missing the opportunity of generational marketing too. But I think you're right. It has to be complemented with technology that works for the people that are going to be using things or want to use things like they do in their daily lives. So yeah, that's great.
I'll even go further than that. Like, if you understand anything about young people today, they're drawn to authenticity in everything from the brands they buy from. So this provides a really nice opportunity for community institutions, because all else, they're authentic, and they should be marketing this, and they should be making it easier for people to bank with them, rather than large national lenders that don't necessarily care as much, I'd say. They're there just to do business, but these community banks are involved within the region. They're out servicing the local communities, and I think that would really play well with the younger institution, or the younger generation, rather.
Absolutely. That's fantastic advice. Well, that's it. I have a question. I feel like we could probably go for a while longer, but Keivan, I'd like to say that this has been fantastic. You've got a lot of interesting, great insight. Yes, of course. I know I was trying to avoid the pun. I was like, I am a sucker for puns, so don't get me wrong. But yes, wonderful insight, and thank you very much for being on the podcast. Is there anything else that you'd like to say or direct people to as far as resources to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn if you can figure out how to spell my name. Brent, please spell my name in the podcast episode for them to find me.
Yes, I absolutely will. And then I will definitely make sure that I have the phonetic spelling. I am sorry that I messed that up myself.
Okay.
Keivan, thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Brent. It's very nice speaking with you.
Absolutely. All right, great. Well, this has been another episode of Mix and Matchbox. I'm your host, Brent Feldman. Please like and subscribe, and we will be back soon with more content. Thanks.